Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. This webinar is hosted by ACI Worldwide and using the Cisco WebEx technology. My name is Dean Messias. I am the event producer assisting with the event today. If you experience any technical issues joining our event, please reach out to the WebEx support team. That number is 1-866-229-3239. In our event today, you'll see panels opened up to the right-hand side. They may be minimized, but you can expand the Q&A panel and submit private questions to us on the panel at any time. Simply open the panel, type in your question, and send to all panelists. At the end of our presentation today, we'll move into a more formal Q&A segment, and we'll try to address all of the questions that were submitted today. Ladies and gentlemen, the audio for the event is being streamed over the Internet to your computer speakers. And if you're having difficulty participating in this manner, please let us know. You can submit your technical concerns using the chat panel and send that to the host. All right. During our presentation today, we will engage the audience with a few polls, quick poll questions that will appear to the right-hand side. So the WebEx polling panel will appear. Simply submit your response to our question, and we'll share those results for a couple of those polls today. And now, without further delay, I'd like to turn the event over to Karen Jarnacy, Director, Merchant Alliances with ACI Worldwide. Karen, please begin.
Hello, and a warm welcome to everybody who joined us for today's webinar. My name is Karen Jarnacy, and I'm the Merchant Alliances Director at ACI Worldwide. We're very pleased that you could join this session that ACI is hosting, along with our partner, U.S. Financial Services Group. Today's topic is how to help retailers save significant money with interchange management best practices. Joining me today from USFSG is Daryl Anderson. Daryl serves as president and oversees worldwide corporate performance, solution development, and management of their sales organization. We're very pleased to be in partnership with USFSG because we feel they can add value for our customers through our collaboration. And ACI has been very impressed with the cost savings that USFSG found for some of their clients. So we decided to formalize our relationship to help other customers save money as well. USFSG has been helping some of the largest retailers for nearly a decade to reduce merchant credit and debit card processing expenses. And over 80% of the time they find significant savings. They built a whole business around helping merchants better understand credit card processing and pricing. And since payments is ACI's expertise, we want to ensure you're getting the most value from your ACI payment switch. So in today's webinar, you will learn at a very high level where to look for cost savings opportunities. And with that, now I'd like to turn it over to Daryl Anderson, and he'll give you an overview of interchange management best practices. Daryl?
Hey, great. Thanks, Karen. Really appreciate the introduction and really appreciate everybody being on the telephone call today and the conference. Look forward to speaking with you all personally, but we'll go through this deck here in relatively brief order. I have a personal reputation for straying far from decks, but I'll try and keep it tied to the deck so you can all follow along. I will obviously stray from the recorded remarks, but let's get started, okay? So, U.S. Financial Services Group is a consulting group that was formed in 2004. Our client base tends to be large retail. We work usually with capital markets firms, and we help them either post-acquisition or pre-acquisition take a look at the payments infrastructure of retailers. When I say payments infrastructure, I'll put an underline under that, because what we do is not necessarily a pure cost savings exercise. There are others in the industry that go around and try and, kick your processor in the shins until they cough up a few shekels, and then they take half of it, and that's the deal. What we do is we take a much deeper dive into the customers. Our clients are, the largest pizza chain in the United States, the largest sporting goods store, the largest wedding goods chain, the largest fabric store chain. Those are the types of clients we deal with. And when we get into it, we're looking at how a transaction is formulated, what your point of sale does, what a switch in your back office might do with a transaction, how it's passed to a processor, how it's received back from a brand. We're matching interchange tables back to what we believe you should be being settled. We're looking at everything that affects the cost of interchange, from when the transaction was formulated by a customer, a guest entering one of your establishments, to what you got back the next day or 2 days, some cases, from the processor. We're really trying to get into the depths of it, because interchange is so expensive. The third largest cost for business in America is the cost of payment acceptance. We really focus on interchange. Focusing on the 2 cents or 2.5 cents or 1.5 cents that you pay as a processing charge is a bit of a fool's game. It's designed to throw you off the real meat of the matter. If your average interchange rate is 2% and you're a hotel and your average checkout is $600, it costs you $12 to move a transaction. The fact they get you to focus on the 2 cents is how the game is played. It's really the interchange and the ability to manage and manipulate that interchange to your advantage is where the real cost savings can be. So we've got, like on this slide, years and years of experience, years and years of people that have worked in every aspect of the industry, whether they've worked at the brands, worked at the processors, worked at ISOs or independent sales organizations, or have worked in various roles with our company as analysts or project managers. We've got a lot of experience on the team. So I want to talk a bit about interchange and why am I focusing on interchange. There's a couple of huge fibs that are out there. One is that interchange is you can't affect it, and that's a bit of a fib. There are things specifically that a merchant can do in the collation or formulation of a payment in order to reduce the cost of interchange. There are things you can do. So anytime a processor says, look, interchange is assessed by the brands, there's nothing you can do about it, just pay it. That's not necessarily true. Interchange has not gone up that much if you look at this slide. Okay, interchange has gone up slightly in the past 10 years or so. But what really is affecting the cost of it is everything is now subject to interchange. You don't take checks and cash as much as you used to. And I was at lunch with somebody the other day, and I challenged them to remember the last time they paid for a meal at a diner with cash. It's all done by credit card. So it's the incidence of use and the percentage of the transactions that are affected by. So when you look at this slide, interchange fees per $1,000 in consumer spending, it's a couple of years old, but it does make the point that your cost of acceptance, because interchange is now applicable to more and more transactions, because you don't use cash and check as much as you used to, your costs have gone up really significantly. The other thing that's, 3-4 years ago, if we look at this slide, interchange is now published. It used to be a bit of a secret. You weren't really advised of all of the different interchange tables that are out there. And there are 503 at last count interchange tables that are out there. They are available, and you can say, well, wait a minute, why didn't I qualify for this rate? Why am I always being assessed this rate? Well, the answer is if you only put in the zip code, you would get a lower rate. If you put in an invoice number in many cases or a tax ID, you would get a lower rate. So now that the covering's sort of off, you know how to, well, we always knew, but the merchant now knows, well, wait a minute, why can't I qualify for this rate on this particular card type? So there's a bit of ability for you to learn more, to understand more about what the costs are going to be. Again, the point I was making before, this slide we refer to as the big blue Pac-Man, is you got to understand who gets paid out of this. Remember that interchange at its highest level is taken from the merchant and given to the issuing banks, right? Pretend there is no Visa or MasterCard. Interchange is taken from the merchant and given to the issuing banks. The issuing banks use it to either profit or to fund their rewards and loyalty programs. And the more cool things they think about and give away, the more costs and burdens they lay on the merchants. So every mile, every reward, every concert ticket that they give away is an incentive to use their card or get their card, you get to pay for. Visa itself and MasterCard are clubs. They simply act as a middleman to facilitate the transaction and membership within the club. So you will see a couple of different fees on your statement. One is called dues and assessments, and it can be hidden or called a couple of different things, but dues and assessments is the 9 or 11 basis points that the club uses to fund its activities. That 9 or 11 basis points is all that Visa, I'm making the quote sign, operates on. They get that 9 or 11 basis points. That does all the club management, all the advertising for Visa worldwide, all the come to the Olympics and see the Super Bowl. That's all done out of that 9 to 11 basis points. The real people that are making the money are the issuing banks getting the lion's share of the interchange when it gets passed through. So 90 to 93% of the cost of a transaction for you is interchange. About 5% goes to the brands, as is on this slide, and somewhere between 2 and 5% goes to the merchant processor. So it's pretty obvious. Interchange is the thing that costs you money, and the issuing banks are the ones that are collecting it. So if we want to make a difference, if we want to reduce costs for you, we go after interchange. Okay? Makes sense? We'll keep going along here. This is a polling question, so Dean, I think you're going to initiate the poll.
Ladies and gentlemen, the poll appears to your right-hand side, so take a moment to submit your responses to the quick question that we have there, and we'll share those results in one moment. Well, I have the results here for you, Darryl.
All right. I'm as curious as you are. In percentage terms, what, well, look at that. 50% of the people on the poll said that they realized that they could control the costs and manage interchange, and 50% didn't know or don't believe that they could manage those costs. So interesting figure, and it's pretty appropriate. I'm going to go in and show you some of the ways that you can manage some interchange costs. So hopefully for the 50% of the people that know, you're going to see some interesting new things, and it'll all be new things for the folks that didn't realize that you can manage interchange. So let's continue along here. So the credit opportunity and the magnitude of what this is, okay? There's a rate that's out there. It's called IRF, and it's not a very good interchange rate. It's when your transaction basically gets through to Visa and MasterCard, but doesn't have as much data as it could. Interchange is formulated to reduce risk and to provide additional services. So the more data that's encompassed in the transaction, the lower the interchange category will conceivably be. The difference between an IRF rate and a standard rate, like a well-qualified rate or a reasonably qualified rate, such as card-present retail, 45 basis points. If it was achieved on only 20% of the transactions, that would be a 9 basis point differential, right? 9 basis points on a $60 average transaction is a savings of 5.4 cents every transaction your company makes or takes. Now again, this is the point I'm underscoring is we will argue for months with our processors and walk on razor blades to save a penny or a half a penny. And there's a 5.4 cents average transaction differential available to us simply by qualifying the transaction prices, the transaction better. And again, this is fixing 20% of your transactions that might fall to an IRF rate, which is a Visa rate, or a standard rate, which is a MasterCard denoted interchange rate. If you're doing 1 million transactions a month, then this would equate to an annual savings of about $650,000 on interchange. If your ticket was $240, like some of our clients in jewelry or perhaps hotel, this simple fix is $2.5 million. The difference between IRF and standard, there should be no IRF transactions. It's generally a failure in your point-of-sale system to supply either a required field or to do a forced submission of the batches. Some point-of-sale systems submit every couple of days. You should be submitting every day. Once you get to 72 hours, you will always fall to IRF. Your entire batch or your entire submission will fall to IRF. So relatively simple fix that can be made to save that kind of money. So just a few basis points on 20% of the transactions can make a huge difference in savings to you. Who does what? Now this is, I like to go into this just so we understand not only the nomenclature, but sort of where we can attack and save you some money. Issuers, okay, those are the people that issue the cards and create the cards. They're paid by Interchange, as we mentioned. These are usually the banks. If it's a Visa flag card, it has to be a bank. It has to be a bank to be a member of the club to issue the card. Even if it says Kohl's department store and it has a Visa flag on the bottom, some bank's standing behind that. An acquirer is always a bank as well. An acquiring bank is a bank that is a member of the club on the acquiring side, because there's members of the club on the issuing side. But on the acquiring side, the bank is the one that stands ultimately behind the merchant. So they say, Visa Club, if my merchant goes down or doesn't honor their chargebacks, I will make good for it. So, which is why you see the intense pressure from the banks to make sure that the merchants are doing the right things around security and compliance and paying their bills, because ultimately they're the ones on the hook. The acquiring bank has the most ludicrous business proposition in the entire stream of payments. They generally make, for sponsoring a transaction, about a quarter of a cent. In that quarter of a cent, they sponsor and stand behind that entire $65 transaction. If there's 1 million transactions, they've got $65 million in outstanding risk, and they made $6,500. When you flip that and say, if you were a commercial lender at one of those banks and say, boss, I just did a $65 million loan, the guy'd say, fantastic, what do we get in fees? And you said $6,500, you'd get thrown out. So the banks are not making a lot of money off of sponsoring transactions, which is why they usually have an acquiring division as well, so they can get some of the transaction revenue other than just the sponsoring. The card brands, the next group we talked about, they manage the club and they create the rules, and there's a variety of them. There's a gateway. There are gateways that take a transaction, and basically all they are is a translator. They take a transaction from your front end, from your point of sale. They translate it into processor language, First Data, TSYS, Global, Elevon, Payment Tech, Fifth Third, and they take that transaction and convert it into the way that processor wants to see it, so the processor can send it to Visa or to MasterCard. Gateways can be complex, they can be simple, they can add value and have reports, or they can just be really just dumb and they just manipulate a transaction, put it in the right order. That's really all a gateway does. An ISO, an independent sales organization, is a firm that under license to the acquiring bank is allowed to sell processing on their behalf. So, and it's interesting that it's relatively unique to the United States. There are no other countries that have the concept of an ISO. If you go to Canada, you don't go to a Heartland or a Transfirst or any of these people that operate under license from an acquiring bank. You go to the Bank of Nova Scotia or Royal Bank of Canada and you cut your processing deal with them. ISOs in the United States operated not because the market was a lot bigger and it's more aggressive, so people were trying to get deals done. ISOs originally came along and said, Mr. Bank, I can offer you value because I know chiropractic and the chiropractors better than anybody. And if you give me license to go after that market, I'll send them all to you. What do you say? And the bank would give them this sort of license. The ISOs, these days are actually what makes the United States a dynamic market. In Canada, there's 12 levels of interchange. In the United States, there's 503. The reasons is as the ISOs, I believe, went very aggressively after certain markets, they pushed the brands into creating better and different interchange tables. So, look, boss, if you could just give me a cool rate for grocery that was something less than 2%, I could get the grocery market to switch from checking cash into credit cards. But they don't got 2% margin, so we can't go there. So Visa and MasterCard came up with a grocery program, and they came up with a fuel program, and they came up with a mobile program, they came up with a web program, and that's basically why interchange is so complex. The role of the ISO has been to expand greatly the acceptance of cards, and they've done a really good job of that. Not without fault sometimes, but they do a good job of that. And debit networks are really offshoots of the card brands, so that when a transaction is passed, it's realized that it goes directly through the bank network. So Pulse and Star and those folks are really just taking the banks and switching it to the transactions and switching it to the banks. So let's take a look at the next slide here, and we'll get into the fun stuff, I promise, in a sec, but we got to get the basics done. Bigger and better is what's happening in the industry. And if you look at this crazy pie chart, you can see that if you take First Data, Chase, Payment Tech, USB Nova, which is now Elavon, BAMS, which is a cool acronym for Bank of America Merchant Services, Global, and Fifth Third, you basically got more than 50% of the market. In fact, the top 10 is about 80% of the market. The top 30 is 95% of the market. So that's really all the folks that you can deal with. Processors, and I worked at a processor for many years, processors are in a bit of a pickle. They used to be able to sell transactions for 5 or 6 cents that the ISO or the acquiring bank would mark up to you to 8 or 10 cents. That's changed. They're lucky to get 2 or 3 cents for a transaction that on average they can sell for 3 or 5 cents. What they're doing in response to that is, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, in your experience with your own processor, is they've necessarily dumbed down their offer. They don't invent cool new products. They don't have as much services as they had before. They certainly don't have the quality of the staff and the account management people that they used to have, because they've been squeezed. Their margins have been squeezed significantly. These guys take an 18% squeeze every contract renewal. That number's true, and every time your contract comes up, there's a little bit of tidbit for information. These folks are expecting an 18% squeeze upon contract renewal. It's just what they've built into the equation. So they know their margins are going down, they're not inventing products, and they're not providing you the level of service or the level of technical expertise you were used to in the past. That's where companies like mine come in and are able to manage and help you sort through the issues that you're having so that you can reduce your cost. Okay. So what does that mean? Let's take a look at this next slide here. This is complex stuff. We mentioned there's 503 levels of interchange. This is not an easy business to get into. There are tricks that are employed at every processor, and every merchant acquirer has these tricks, and you have to know what they are. So we're looking on your behalf. Are you downgrading? If you look at that one slide, they're paying 2.70%, 2.30% on a number of transactions. How many levels of interchange are you hitting? Well, if you're a card-present retailer, you should hit a few interchange rates. You should hit a few more based on you're going to see a few different card types presented, a rewards card, a corporate card, a regular old signature card. And you're going to see a few rates based on debit, and you're going to see a few rates based on whether it was Visa or MasterCard. At most, 20 rates, 25 rates. When we see pages of interchange levels that are presented, we understand that there's potentially a problem there. When you look at some of these rates, what do you pay on downgrades? We'll often see padding put into the rate tables. So wait a minute, the IRF rate is 2.60 and you're being charged 2.70. So the processors will put a little pad on there for a higher rate. How much you're being charged for authorizations? If you look at this particular slide here, the poor merchant's being charged 4.5 cents for authorizations. But when you look at the little red box, and I know it's hard to read, but it says 254,000. We go back and match the front end numbers back to what you're being billed. In this particular case, they're being double charged. Every auth was counting as 2. So unless you did the basic math, you'd never figure out that you're being double charged for your authorizations. The defense of the processors and your acquiring partners has always been, hey, we give you access to reports. We even send you a detailed bill. If you look at this example, it's page 4 of 992. You will never figure this out, and you will never understand all the tricks that they have and they can pull. It is very difficult. Every time, I mean, we've been doing this, a dozen years. Every time that we look at another merchant statement, we find another little thing that we've never noticed before as to way transactions were collated or processed or priced. 83% of the time, we find a mismatch between what you contracted for and what you're invoiced for. We check that and go back to the contract to make sure you're being charged the right amount. So it's difficult to manage this on your own, but it's good to have a checkpoint for somebody like us to go in and take a look and see if there's things you can do. Next slide here, are you being charged additional penalties for downgrades? Again, this is not often spelled out in your contract or not really in your reconciliation process, is that many times they will throw a fee on for downgrades. So not only are you paying the higher rate, the 2.70 that I mentioned in my little example, they may throw on 5 or 10 basis points, like in this case, for downgrades on top of it, which is a little risk premium that they throw into their own pocket. So those are, another example of the types of things that we'd be looking for. Another favorite trick, and I think I have a top 10 list at the end of this slide deck that we're going to make available to you, and it's just some top-level things that you can take a look at to see if there's something of interest that you're not doing, and it's a little bit of a pro bono for attending our little session today. But are you being charged separately for captured transactions, and if so, at what rate? Again, everybody will argue and focus on negotiating their authorization rate. What am I paying for an auth, boss? 2 cents. Many of the processors divide a transaction into 4 pieces: authorization, capture, clearing, and settlement. And they may negotiate like heck on the first part and say, we've got the lowest authorization rate in the business, but they'll get you on the clearing and settled rate. So in this particular example, they're paying 3 cents for settlement, which is actually more than they're paying for authorization. The merchant thought he was getting 2 cents, but when you add the 2 plus the 3 plus the clearing, he's paying 6.5 cents to do a transaction. So again, it's one of the other things that we look at. Again, one of the tricks that's used on this next slide is a little bit of jiggery-pokery. This merchant had a pass-through deal where essentially, well, I'm doing everything at Interchange pass-through. The processor sort of hid it in the background that they were charging a non-qualification surcharge, basically saying, we'll give you pass-through interchange except for when it's a poorly qualified transaction, then we're going to charge you a premium. So it was an interesting take on it to say, yeah, we're giving you pass-through interchange, boss, but we're going to take a little piece off the back end. So they're making their money off the back. Next slide here, another example. We can see that the discount rate or the rate that they're due on their pass-through is actually different than what they put in the contract. So the contracts are complex, and they end up having a lot of variance over the years. So they introduce a new fee or a product, or the Visa or brands introduce new fees, and you get in a sort of a midterm situation where your contract doesn't match what they're billing you. And we take a look at the current contract and match that up to make sure that we're at least accurate. So given that, what I'm saying is there is a lot of procedural changes, simple ones, that can be made, and simple inspections that can be done to realize what you're paying and to manage that on a proactive basis. So I think next we have one more poll. I'll turn it over to the moderator, and you guys can answer that one, and we'll see what we get.
And again, ladies and gentlemen, to the right-hand side, you'll see the polling panel. Please go ahead and submit your responses, and we will share these results in one moment. Thank you. And Daryl, the results are displayed for you now.
Well, this is when I asked for a bonus, because 100% of you understood that there are some simple and effective ways to manage these costs, and hopefully you've learned some new things that you'd never seen before. So that's good. You know, we've climbed the second part of the mountain, so there are ways to manage interchange, and there are simple things you can do to manage and fix those interchange, the least of which is examining your bill with a critical eye. So thank you for that and your answers. That's good. We're well on our journey here. Client results. This is a bit of puffery here, but I'll talk about some of the things that we've been able to do. Reduce the cost of interchange for a petroleum C-store combination by 25 basis points is a $5 million annual savings to them. I often, when I talk to large merchants, put it in perspective and say, given your margins as a fuel company or a grocery store or retailer, what is the equivalent revenue bump that you would have had to get to save $5 million? And based on their margins, they would have had to make $100 million to save $5 million. These savings, as I underlined, drop right to your bottom line. And ACI has been a really good partner with us, so that we've been able to talk to some of their largest merchants, maybe not as formally as we are today, but to get in front of them to say there are savings that are available. And it's really, I think ACI deserves some applause as your software partner and your systems partner to be able to offer a service like ours, because it's just evidence that they're thinking of your relationship in a wider scope than just you pay me, I pay you, we'll have a conference at the end of the year and we'll have a beer. This is a deeper relationship. I think that they're creating value for you. Identified and corrected POS software is a large hotel chain in Las Vegas, of all places, $130,000 a month in increased fees. Basically, when you check out of your room using that TV, whoever set the software up set that up as card not present. Well, of course it's card present. You use the card to check in. So it was a simple flag that cost them $130,000. And back to my example, if you don't put in the attributes of a lodging transaction, it ends up being a 3% transaction. On a $600 average checkout at this hotel, and you'd know the name if I say it, it costs them $18 to check out a client. With this fix, the proper flag, it was 2% of $600, which is $12. It was $6 savings every client that checked out of the hotel, at least the ones that used the in-room checkout. Was a significant amount, $130,000 a month with zero input. Those are really the types of things we zero in on, that somebody set a flag somewhere wrong, and we can fix that and qualify for a better rate. Recommended a new processing environment for a large pharmaceutical company. Basically, their current gateway would strip out all of the address verification information when they passed it to the processor, who while the merchant was doing all the work to gather the address data, or at least validate it. And that's an interesting thing. I'll take a jog here aside. The rules are subtle. The rules say for ABS qualifications you don't need to gather the customer's address. It says you have to attempt to ascertain the customer's address. Simply by putting the store's zip code in the transactional field, you can qualify for an ABS rate. It doesn't say it has to be the customer's address. So it's a bit of a subtlety. Most merchants will say, I'm not going to slow down the flow, and I'm not going to ask for the customer's address. You don't have to qualify for the lower rate. So we've been able to help clients work through that. Identified billing errors, a large grocery chain. One of those examples that I showed you where they're being double charged was those. And identified a terminal security risk. Many times when we work with large clients, we'll find errors that are not necessarily financially based, but potentially risk-based, and say, look, Chief, you got to stop doing that because it's going to get you sooner or later. So what does it mean when you work with us? Mature business enterprises can expect an average reduction of 10 to 30 basis points in processing expenses as a result at the interchange network level as a typical U.S. FSG engagement. There's additional measures that can be deployed to generate additional savings. It depends on the nature of your contract. There's ways we can make your processor do unnatural acts to reduce your cost, but it really depends on your contract. We're not making you change processors. You don't have to buy new infrastructure. I mean, these are simple fixes that can be made, as we talked about, setting the flag in the hotel or simply having the system not default to a blank field when you could put in the store zip code. These are very simple fixes for the most part. We're not talking about wholesale changes. We work on contingency. We don't charge you anything unless we find something, and we don't get paid unless those savings go into your bank account. It doesn't cost anything to use us. It doesn't cost anything to engage with us. And the work to gather information from us, we estimate a large merchant is 6 to 10 hours of resource time. If you can devote somebody for 6 to 10 hours, we can provide you with the initial inspection and overview to be able to ascertain whether there's an issue at your organization and whether there's something that we can fix. And like we said, 83% of the time we find significant savings. So it's real easy to work with us, and it doesn't cost you anything. And we often, and I did this for the largest sporting goods store in the nation, after 2 weeks of going soup to nuts through their organization, we couldn't find anything. God bless you, we wrote a note to the chairman of the company and said, you guys are doing a fantastic job. Not only do they have the smarts to engage us, we've gone through everything, and you guys are rock solid. Take a bow. And so we'll do that. But like I say, 83% of the time we actually find something. Here's a few tips that I think you might want to see. Validate your invoice 100% of the time. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a large merchant where they haven't validated the invoice or even opened the invoice. No three-tier pricing models, no penalties, none of that stuff should exist. Merchants of your size and caliber should have a simple pass-through interchange rate, no penalties, and then a cost per transaction, which will make sure that it's only for the authorization, not the clearing and the settlement and all that. If you're doing a fixed rate, the average arbitrage on that is 32 basis points. So if somebody comes along and says, why don't we just fix everything at 2.5%, it'll make it easy to reconcile, what do you think? It costs you 32 basis points more on average to do it that way. Watch for fees that aren't part of the authorization process. We talked about that. Ask your compliance, your processor and gateway to validate that they are in compliance with every association table and edit 100% of the time. When the brands send out new rules every April and October, as they want to do, the processor has to make changes to their system to accept the transaction. What we find is certain processors will go, geez, there's a new rule about Polish corporate cards. We don't see a lot of those. Let's not put it in. And over time, when you're a big operation like you folks, you end up taking Polish corporate cards and other sort of end-liar payment types, and their system gets sloppier and sloppier. We always recommend that you get them to attest that they're up to date with every edit package and every requirement from the card brands, because if they're not, your transactions qualify worse, and the issuing banks collect more money and you pay more money. It doesn't hurt the processor at all. They still get their 4.5 cents. So that's why we always insist that they put it in writing that they are. Last one is interesting, pay only for completed authorizations, not attempted or submitted. What we find as much, and this is really a nice pro bono for you, as much as 10% of the transactions are attempted but never go through. So essentially, if your gateway authorizes a transaction but doesn't settle it, or a transaction was attempted but doesn't get a response code, they're charging the full 4.5 cents for that, or whatever your authorization fee is. So and the processors roll over all the time. We just say we're not paying for transactions that you didn't complete. We're only paying for the transactions that went through or were in fact settled. So that's generally a gimme from those. We have much success, probably 70% of the time, in reducing things like this midterm of your contract. So don't worry about, geez, I'm 3 years into a 5-year contract, Darryl, there's nothing I can do. That's not true. Most of these folks, the processors, know how the game is played, and they'll make changes to keep you as a client. Okay. Polling question. This is the one. This is where you can make me feel good. Not to bias your answer. This is a totally independent poll. Would you be interested in spending a few minutes with our experts from USFSG to explore if there are incremental cost savings in your organization? We can have a 15-minute dialogue with you at a time to be arranged and talk a little more in depth about what we do, but in particular about your organization. Does that sound like something that you'd want to invest in? Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Darryl. Yes, so we're not going to share these results. We're going to look at this as a one-off after the event concludes. So you're welcome to continue with your presentation. I'll leave the poll open for everyone to submit their responses for a few more minutes.
All right, thank you. And we'll see what the results are. And again, we look forward at U.S. Financial Services Group to having a chat with you and potentially saving you some revenue. I hope you've taken away from this dialogue today that we are doing things a little different. We're not just going out and trying to reduce costs. We're looking at the way transactions are collated and submitted and trying to professionally make those changes. We understand all of the systems, all of the processors, most if not all of the different gateways and software packages that are out there, which is essentially why we started working with ACI, because they have such a breadth in the market. Their clients really use their products well and understand them and like them as a client. So we've been working with them for a couple of years now, and on a number of clients have had some success. I also want to say thanks to ACI. ACI has been, as I mentioned, not only a great partner, but very innovative in the way that they create value for their clients, and I hope that the dialogue today is evidence of that. They are a good partner. I can tell you I work with dozens of software providers out there in the industry, and ACI is clearly the leader when it comes to managing the relationships and providing ancillary and core value to their clients. They are a professional organization that does the right thing whenever they're required to do so. So we appreciate the partnership. That's really all I have to say. Again, we'd love to work with you. The contact information is on the last slide, and I'll turn it back over to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darryl. We really appreciate that great presentation today. Here's the contact information for everyone to look at. And let me just ask if there's any remarks from Karen before we end the event.
No, I didn't have anything to add. Thank you, Darryl. Nice job and great information. And again, thanks to everyone on the line for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.